Hello, everybody, and welcome back to LSE IT Corner. I'm pretty sure you guys saw the short which I posted where we just did the quick install of SnapD and then Node.js. Quite often when you have Node.js installed via SnapD, it fails on you to work and you can't make it to work and keep things updating. So if you go back, you saw already in the short that we were on version 22.15.1, so 22.15.1, and now when we do already a node-v, we are already on 22.16. That happened because SnapD automatically updates it when there is a new version coming out. And we're talking about, as you can see here on the left, there are my notes for all this, and they're going to be posted again on the website. So you can copy and paste over as you're working. So the thing is, we stopped at making actually our folder for the Node.js to be installed in and to be configured in. I did a couple steps already ahead because I wanted to make sure what I'm teaching you guys here, that it actually all works and doesn't fail on you, because I've done installations before where it will fail on you when you don't do certain steps. So what I done is, as you can see in my notes, so we did the basic installation, and now we just get apt install for Python 3. We just have that, and it already says it's already the newest version, which is what we expect to happen. So 3.12.3 is the version which is right now installed. What you can do, and I highly recommend you for be doing, is if you're working under root, and when you do this under root in the beginning, I think it's the best way to secure the operating system. It's the best way to making sure that it actually runs as a service. And so when you run it really as a Node.js server, I highly recommend it to run it as a service. And that's exactly what we're going to do here in the quick installation tutorial here and how to get things working. One of the things which I've done is you actually set your npm config for Python hard so that this one is exported, and then you just take your source, right? And you see it over there already, me being noted dot, and I'm using the bash rc here. So what the source bash rc does is just reloading my bash correctly. And then with that, I have the npm configuration for Python set to be in user bin Python 3. That seems to make a huge difference and a key part for everything being installed correctly. Now, we have a couple of projects coming up, and that's why I'm going and install a couple things right out of the box, because we're going to use all of those down the line as we progress with this project. Because there are a couple of things where it ties into the marketing later on, but it's also for anybody who wants to work with Make or with Sapphire or with any type of automation on the outside world and using it as an API interface. We'll dive into this in a couple of these following videos of this series, but this is why I'm installing a couple of things extra which you do not need right off the bat when you just want to get basic things working. So, but we have the source done. Now we can do an npm install whatever package we want to install. And we can also do the same as you see in the note, remove. So if we say we want to install, and this is for demonstration purpose, so SQLite, we don't use really, but I want to show you what's going to happen. So it runs through, gets from the external npm source everything it needs, it downloads it, installs it, tells you how many packages were added, and audit what is already installed. Now you say, okay, I didn't need this package. How do I get rid of it? In my notes, you already see it. So npm remove and then SQLite 3, and then this will remove that package again. As you can see, there are still a couple things which happened. So, right, there are a couple packages which looking for being funded, and they are, let's see what this gonna give us. So there are a couple packages which needs funding in order to work proper. That's all that means. They are already installed because I already went 2 steps ahead to making sure everything what we're installing here will work in our setup. So can I do an NMP autofix? Yes, I can. So let's see what this does when we do just exactly that. So removed 3 packages, changed 8 packages, and audited 392 packages in 3 seconds. Pretty fast, pretty efficient. Everything is now done. So for the projects which we're going to do, and we're going to go through a couple things, you can do a different way here and there, but essentially you want to use most of them the same exact way like I do. So in here, we're going to install Axios, body parser, course.env, express, fast JSON parse, because that is an option which you want to do when you do JSON. GM, I'll talk about it in a minute. The same is for Joy. So these two are dependent on each other for what we're going to do, which is the next video coming up, where we do some groundwork which make Sapphire and others don't offer us to do so with, without really going through a big pain of configurations. Here we can simplify it. Newman is for troubleshooting. Postman runtime is for troubleshooting. Sharp, just as a basic one. Winston and Winston syslog. This is very, very important. If you want to get your Node.js to do syslogging, real clean syslogging. And so this is what this video also includes. We're already tapping into that. So Winston, I found out, is the best there is for doing it on a global level. So there may be other ones, but this is what I found. So that's why I recommend you using Winston syslog. Path for regex we'll use later on, where we're going to do regex for certain URL queries which come, and then we're going to convert those over into something else so it automatically matches out of the database correctly. That's why we need MySQL. So there's a lot of stuff coming. Now, the next thing we want to see is, okay, what we just installed, and again, let's run these quickly just to making sure that they are all installed. I did it earlier already behind the scene, but they were all installed correctly. But you can see, okay, everything is there. Added 3 packages to it, and everything is fine, and nothing really changed here. So let's do the audit fix quickly. And with the audit fix, yeah, everything looks good. Newman is the only one which has now module and version changes to it, but we can ignore that for now because we are not actively needing this. So the next things is you want to run these commands: node-v, npm-v, and then which node and which npm is being in use. So you can run them all together, and then you see what you actually have installed. So you have node-v, you have npm-v, and so on. So 2216 is the npm version, and oh no, hold on. Node version is 2216, npm version is 10.9.2, and the executable path are snapbin node and snapbin npm. This seems to be working very well and gives me the information I need. Now the next steps are maybe redundant, but I do it for the sake of security. So you can do it either user based, which would be a nano on root and the bash rc, or you do it a system-wide nano etc profile, which I prefer to do since we want to run it as a service. So in the service, we're going to run it as a systemd service. So we let the operating system handle all that configuration. So what I do is I go in, and you see my export file already here, my line. I set it right in the beginning just to make sure that that path structure is set proper, so that it shows me always user bin, user local bin being grabbed correctly as a path. Once we do that, we can reload the shell again. Already done that, so I didn't do any changes, so I don't have to do it. But essentially, you just go through, take it, copy it in, reload. Now your bash is loaded and your path is correct. Now here I did a little change, so let me adjust here in the configuration already. So, and I did already some configuration in it because I wanted to make sure a couple things are working proper and that you don't run into issues. So, nano opt Node.js server.js, right? All we have to do in the first setup to making sure that the thing is actually up and running is this little section which I highlighted. So if you do this and you go in, you're going to see now a lot more being already added to it, but I want to explain a couple things here to you. So as you can see, I did a server start, did the modules all already loaded. I did some pre-configuration. We'll tap into that in detail later on. But the important part is this down server start section here, which is exactly what you want to have running, which you see here on the nodes on the left. So the HTTP comes standard with Express and Node.js. So once that is already installed, you don't have to install HTTP as an additional NPM module. It's already built in. There are a couple other ones like URL is in there. Let me just scroll up here because they are listed out here. So HTTP, the app is in, URL is in, path is in. So there are a lot of them already in, which you don't have to install anymore because it's coming standard now with it. I might have missed one or two here. So all you want to do now is to set up your server to run as a server with an HTTP server on application level. That's why you say start my server here. A constant server equals HTTP create server app. So everything where you see here app later on, that's what's being started with this command. Second thing is you want to give it a port. Now in our case, we like to run it on port 3000, but you can do it on whatever high port you want to do. So anything higher than 1024, no problem. Because we are in Kamatera, and Kamatera is still not having full IP version 6 integrated, you have to do a little bit of a trick. So constant IP4 0000 means grab me off the host IP on IP4, that port and IP, whatever is set there, and run on any what is set on that interface, so to speak. And so if you have multiple servers, it will run on multiple, but it's an any IP, right? Now you're going to start the whole thing, what you just set up here. And now you start it and you say, okay, LSE underscore logger dot info. Server is running on TCP port. Give me the port IPv4. If your server does do an IP version 6 as well, you see down here is the same setup for version 6, just commented out because on our server we're running only IP version 4. I'll dive into the rest of the configuration here in a second. So now we have that configured and we have not done anything else to it yet. But what we now need to do is to make sure that our Node.js can be started as a service so that we can say service, Node.js, start, status, stop, restart, right? So what we're going to do here is we embed that whole thing into SystemD. And in SystemD, which is the way things are now progressing again, we had that already a couple years ago, and then it faded away because then inetd came out and RCD and all that, and now we're going back to SystemD, which was already used by FreeBSD for a long time, but things weren't fully developed back then, so that's why things move back and forth. And so here you can see, first you describe your unit. So your unit section, you give it a description. That's whatever you want to say. Okay, for me it's my Node.js server. And then when do you want to start? So after network target, meaning when the network is done. Now, the service you want to execute for that in the section is snap-bin node, like what we already looked up further, and opt Node.js server.js. I already predefined that file there, and this is what the only thing which you really have to hard code, plus the opt Node.js for the hard working directory in it. Restart always, restart second 10, you can change that. So if you want, because you are developing something and your application crashes, you can automatically restart it. That's what you do with always. There are different options, you can read it up. Restart second 10. So that means it takes 10 seconds before it restarts it. So it gives the operating system some time to recoup before it starts to restart. Then on which user you want to run it. So I want to run my service under root. You could create your own user and make it much more system independent, but mine, I want to run it under root because one thing I don't do with Node.js is to expose it directly to the public. What I do is I expose it only to my web server on an application level. So it has to go through Nginx, executes through Nginx onto Node.js, the queries and calls, and we're gonna get into these steps. So there's a reverse proxying, so to speak, involved, but this way you can protect your environment. The other thing is you can give it an environment name. So in this case, node environment equals production. Then we want, what we're going to dive into here next in this video as well, is to syslog everything proper. So because the logging out of the box is like, well, what do you want to log? Where you want to log? As what you want to log? It's all up to you to decide. I prefer syslog because especially when you are working in bigger corporated environments, everything goes through syslog. It goes to either a central or clustered central syslogging environment. Splunk is a big one on the market. Graylog is another one. I used both of them over the years. For startup companies, I prefer the Graylog now because it's free, open source. You can get a lot done before you reaching limitations. And so that's why I prefer Graylog now. But Splunk has the same capability. It's just, it starts with $10,000, so to speak, to make sense to use it, because then you get the cluster node and everything with it. So prices might have changed over the last couple of years, but that's what it was a couple of years ago for me. Syslog identifier Node.js. So you want to make sure that whenever there's a logging going on, that it will tell in the syslog, hey, this is actually a syslog entry which comes from a Node.js server, so that you can do a search for the application within. And you want to install it as wanted by multi-user target. So that's a standard setup so that multi-users can start and control and run it, but it's owned under the user root. So that's pretty much what you have to do. If you don't have it as a multi-user target, when you have normal boot up sequences, you have to do something special to make it work. So I highly recommend for you just leave it as is. If you want to change it, that's on yourself. I don't recommend. So now we have that done. And once we have that done and we have that written, we have to run these 4 commands, and really you can really copy and paste them. And you can change the name here of whatever you want it to be called at, right? But I prefer it as a Node.js. So I just run this quickly through, ran all those. As soon you do changes in the server.js, you will have to rerun often these 2. But it's the first line which is the key part. Oops, actually these 2. Sorry, it didn't really grab the first 2. So the daemon re-execute when there's something changed in your configuration, and then daemon reload, just making sure everything is the same. So quite often you're going to run through that. So keep those nodes always handy. Syscontrol, you enable the Node.js, and syscontrol start Node.js, which is the same as when you use service, right? Node.js and do now start. That's the same thing as your system control start Node.js. Two different calls, two different methods. But why do I like the service more? Because I'm used to it. That's all there is to it. But I can see now it's up and running. It was not up and running right out of the bay because I used a configuration which I had on a different environment with a different version running, and I had a couple of funky things in there because I was doing some development. So, but essentially what you want to do now is checking if everything is running. So netstart NTLP, very, very important. And let's go back to it with this. So now we can do, and let me get this screen a little bit bigger here and just refresh that command again. So now you can see with a netstat, you see what's running on your network locally as a service. Pretty much what creates a port and what is listening to the port. So N is network, T is TCP, L is listen, P is protocol. So in this case, we want to see only anything which is running on TCP because we don't want to care about UDP ports right now. So we have here MySQL running, we have here port 9000 running, which is our PHP running. But here we have now under what we configured already, our node running. And it listens to any. And that's exactly what I mean. So you can set it up to run only local, like 127.0.0.1, so to speak, local, right? Or column, and then port 3000 if you want to run it on IP version 6. Gives me issues. That's why I didn't use it on IP version 6 on this version. This is actually a 2404 LTS, but it's because of what Kamatera is setting it up as when it's being installed on their VM managers. Because the IP6 is not really proper set, so it floats around here as a unknown state really. So it's a little bit not really usable. So that's why I'm not starting it as such. But I have created correct IP addresses on both interfaces. We'll dive into this in a much later stage why we have another interface. So, but because you just installed it doesn't mean it is exposed to the public. So when you do a UFW, you see again, we do not have that port exposed to the public. So nobody from the outside world knows that these ports, 3000, 9000, and so on, that they are actually running and being allowed to be accessed there. So that's why firewalling is so important, because you can have something running and necessarily have it running for open, because internally later on you might want to say, oh, anything internally connected to the 10.00 network, so 10.0.0 to 10.0.1.255, because it's class 23, would then have access to it if I would grant it through the firewall an access, but it would not expose then the outside world. So I can define even on the firewall on which interface I want to grant access and what IP address ranges, etc. So as series continues, we're gonna do also server splits, moving a service from one server to another. So really what's gonna happen when you do DevOps work and grow with your system. First you put everything on one server, trying to get everything to work, right? And once it all scales, then you say, oh, now I need to scale, because either I throw a ton of money for hardware added, or I just spin up a couple more VMs for the same $4 or $5 a month, and so I have like the Node.js on one server, after PHP on another server, completely independently running from the Nginx upfront, because I want to do some redundancy. So there's a lot of things you can do, and that's why you like to use a real image. uh, the real port and the real IP address. Sorry. So the other thing which we're gonna do already, and this is already a preview for what's coming up. We already installed ImageMagick, and that allows us in an upcoming video to demonstrate. In that case, we're gonna open up the firewall a little bit to it as well, where you can actually call into it and you can send a picture in one format and give it some flags with it, and it will convert it automatically for you from, let's say, PNG over to JPEG, or from a JPEG into a web format, or much more modern files, right? Because sometimes when you do publish posts into through Make or into social media, especially when it goes over to Instagram, and you want to push something into Instagram, when it's a PNG, you have like a lot of chance. It might work or might not work. Quite often, Make is then pushing that IPA over, or we do it directly. Then it comes back and says file format not supported, but JPEG always is. That's one of the problems with some social media platforms, called SMM for short. Some support certain formats, some don't support those, but support others. With that, one of the applications we're going to build, we can do an auto image conversion on the server directly before we even send it with an API anywhere else. So that will come in a future series video where we dive into it. There's a lot more coming, but let's go back to where we are right now. So we have everything up and running, but we didn't configure yet the syslog side. So what I've done already in the server, let's go back to it. I created already a couple things because I'm going to use them in the demonstration down the road. So one of the things we can always do is to monitor, to making sure that the server is running and that it's also just doing what it's supposed to be doing for logging purpose, right? So the other thing which we want to do is we want to give it, you can see it here, a certain logging with it. So we want to make sure that we can log something, like down here you see it, let me highlight it, LSE underscore logger. You can name it whatever you want, but you have to bring the consistency across because it's a service you're running pretty much as an app. And in this case, we want to just do an info for something being requested as such and then being logged as such. So up here, you see the LSE logger requires LSE syslog, and we're going to go into that file here in a second. What it does is anytime you do anything like starting a server, restarting a server, anything you want to log anywhere in any of the files, you can now use that. So what we're going to do is we have Winston, as we mentioned before, and we have here already our file totally configured the way it works best. I'll post this. Please copy and paste it. It will work in your favor because what it does, it complies with the syslog format all the way and logs everything into your local syslog, right? So what we do here is we just call for Winston and we require Winston-syslog, like what we installed earlier as an npm packages, the two. Now it's being required here. So it requires that. Now we create a custom format. We even breaking down the stack a little bit. It's not the best, but it works very well. I'll show you a couple things, what I've run into it earlier, just to see how to do error handling. So this is your custom format, and then it returns that log message correctly converted over for syslog. Then it does do the instance itself, creates it, handles it, and you say as a transport, localhost port 514, so local, right? And then protocol UDP4, app name is Node.js, facility, severity. This is just a set. You override it when you send it. So you don't worry about it, but you need to send something in the beginning here. So, and then I said, okay, I want this global. Means I can call it from now on, in all my coding, in all my environments, wherever it is on this Node.js server, system-wide. So that's why LSE_logger is very, very important. But make sure you spell it always the exact same way because it is case sensitive. So LSE uppercase underscore L uppercase and then the rest lowercase. That will get you going. And then you, of course, have to export the module so it's exportable. That is done, and when you go back into the server here, you can see that I actually called for it up here. And so that's essentially what I called a requirement of another file into the main file, and now I can access it throughout the whole system. And so down here, when you go down, you see already down here, I'm already calling it. So and that's exactly what we're going to look into to see what is it actually writing out. Same as here, it's writing something out. There's a normal JSON request back, but here's the putting it into a file, what's really going on. So let's do this. Server is started. We know already it's started. It's already running with the configuration. So if we now do a tail -f -n, meaning how many lines you want to go backwards of the last entry. So let's go 200 of var log syslog. We already see that there's a lot. Let me pause it here for a second. There's a lot of UFW firewall rules and other things are in the syslog being logged. As you can see, there's a lot of stuff going on because things are happening on the server. But you also see that the snap is starting, stopping, updating, doing a lot of things in between. And so not everything what we have seen here is really relevant for us. But now, since I did a little bit more troubleshooting beforehand, let's say I want to do, let's do 15,000, and we grab Node.js. Node.js. Now we see what Node.js was messing with and having issues with. So all the logs which are Node.js initiated, you see it. So SystemD, when it starts it, you see here it starts it, ran into an issue, and then crashes and fails with an exit code. And it says it stopped it. So you see all these messages coming through. This is the stack block. This is how I got the stack to work. So I can see in that stack, when there's a one-liner, I break it down into multiple so I can easier troubleshoot what is actually causing the issue, and then I can troubleshoot with it. So that's why I wrote it the way I wrote it. You can change it differently, of course, but this is how it works. But when your server is starting just perfectly fine, you should see something like this. Start Node.js service, because we did it as a systemd service. My Node.js server, and then the second line should come from the Node.js instance itself, no longer from the systemd, telling you, hey, info, server is running on port 3000, right? So here you see it, we set it up. So quick recap, going back and doing a nano server. What you just saw is coming here. Server is running on TCP port 3000 on IP version 4. That's exactly that message what we're sending, right? So that's exactly where we are. So when you'll see that, that's exactly where we are. Let me go a little bit up, right? So there it is. Server is running on TCP port 3000 IP version 4. That's exactly that message. So now that is good. Now the other thing is we have the server running, and we set up already in it that we have an apt-get available. So apt-get and apt-use, so it's /status. So we can see what is the status of this server. It should give us something back in the form of, okay, message Node.js application is running as an HTML file. So when we do now, and let's go into a temp folder here quickly, we run a wget http // /status. We save that status file. So now let's get that status file open. There it is. Status, okay, message Node.js application is running. And this is a JSON. So that is a JSON answer. So you can handle it in multiple ways, but this allows you then to talk and work JSON straight away, which in the future series you will see why we're gonna go a lot into JSON, because with JSON, the modern version of the XML, so to speak, JSON allows you to push a lot of data, including image data and whatnot, all through one data snippet and push it like a data stream back and forth between social media platforms because they talk JSON on their end. So that's why we want to go with the Node.js and getting everything set up. So back to here, we had things already copied. You see there's a line, right? I just left it down here as an information. So there you see as a reminder, the Winston and the Winston syslog is what we installed, which is what you need for your syslog. The rest will touch into the next projects coming up, but there's a lot coming up. And some of that I mentioned already. There's also things where we push and pull things out of the database, MySQL really, and use that content to feed content into the API, into JSON, and pushing it actually to social media platforms like Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, X, so that you don't necessarily need to rely on make, but with make you can make your, sounds duplicated, but with make you can make a lot of things easier, streamlined, and just you configure one data stream versus if you go straight, you have to configure every single one as an individual API data stream. So we'll touch both approaches down in the project series. But again, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. Every like and subscribe will help out the channel for the videos to come more and more. And we're working through this as we grow. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a good one.